They say true love knows no time, but for 96-year-old Martin Freeman, it's been 78 years of wondering what could have been. Living quietly in Silver Springs, his days are marked by memories of a beautiful young woman who vanished from his life in 1945. But fate has extraordinary plans for this World War II veteran. When a young boy's screams pierce through his peaceful neighborhood, Martin doesn't hesitate. His act of courage against a ruthless gang will make headlines across the city. But the real story, the boy he just saved, is the grandson of the only woman he ever loved. Could this be destiny's way of mending a love story 78 years in the making? The brass key turned in the lock with practiced precision as Martin Freeman completed his morning walk. 6:30 a.m., just like clockwork. The early autumn air had grown crisp, painting his cheeks a gentle pink, but his stride remained steady. At 96, he took pride in maintaining his routines. Inside his modest brownstone, everything had its place. The mahogany side table by the door held today's mail, still unopened. The worn leather armchair faced east, catching the morning. Light that spilled through lace curtains Eleanor Sullivan's mother had made, though he never knew why he'd kept them all these years. Martin hung his light jacket on the brass coat rack, smoothing an invisible wrinkle. His fingers, still strong despite their age, brushed against the wooden box on the hallway shelf. The medal box, as he called it, though it held more than just his military honors. He carried it to his armchair the same way he had every morning for decades. The box's hinges creaked softly. He'd never oiled them, feeling somehow that the sound had become part of the ritual. Inside, his purple heart lay nestled in burgundy velvet, along with the other medals from his service in World War II. But it was the envelope beneath them that drew his attention, as it always did. Yellowed with age, still sealed. The letter bore a postmark from 1945. "Not today," he murmured, the same words he'd spoken every morning since he'd received it. The letter had arrived too late, 3 weeks after Eleanor Sullivan had disappeared from his life. He'd never found the courage to read it, afraid it might contain the explanation he'd spent a lifetime imagining. A sharp rap at the door interrupted his reverie. "Mr. Freeman," Sarah Chen's voice carried clearly through the wood. "I've brought you some of that sourdough you like." Martin carefully replaced the letter and closed the box. "Coming, Sarah?" He smiled as he opened the door to his neighbor, a retired schoolteacher who'd appointed herself his unofficial guardian 10 years ago when her family moved in next door. "You're later than usual this morning," she said, pressing the warm bread into his hands. Her dark eyes narrowed with concern behind her glasses. "Everything all right?" "Had to take the long way around today," he explained, gesturing for her to come in. "Those boys were hanging around the corner store again." Sarah's expression darkened as she followed him to the kitchen. "The same ones Mrs. Rodriguez complained about. I heard they've been causing trouble all over the neighborhood." Martin set about slicing the bread, his movements precise. "3 of them. Can't be more than 16 or 17, but they're scaring people. Old Mr. Chen at the store, he's thinking of selling." "My Henry said the same thing." Sarah accepted the tea Martin offered. "The police drive by sometimes, but these kids just scatter and come right back. It's not like it used to be." But Martin remembered different troubled times. Different troubled youth. He'd seen how poverty and desperation could drive good people to bad choices. "Maybe someone just needs to talk to them," he mused. Sarah snorted. "You're too soft-hearted, Martin. These aren't the boys you knew from the war. Times have changed." The morning sun caught the edge of Eleanor Sullivan's photograph on the mantel, and Martin's eyes were drawn to it, as they always were. "Some things don't change, Sarah. Everyone needs someone to believe in them." After Sarah left, Martin settled into his chair with the morning paper. The headlines spoke of rising crime rates and gang activity spreading from the city center. But his thoughts drifted to Eleanor, to that last night at the Golden Pavilion. He'd been in uniform, she'd worn blue, and the band had played "I'll Be." "Seeing you," They'd promised to meet the next evening, but she never came. No explanation, no goodbye, just the silent weight of that unopened letter and a lifetime of wondering why. A shout from the street drew his attention. Through the window, he could see a young boy, couldn't be more than 12, hurrying along the sidewalk, clutching his backpack. The 3 boys from the corner store were following, their postures carrying the unmistakable threat of predators stalking prey. Martin's hand tightened on his cane. Sarah was right. Times had changed, but some things, like courage and doing, what's right, those remained the same. With deliberate care, he pushed himself to his feet. "Well, Eleanor," he murmured to the photograph, "shall we see what trouble we can get into today?" The golden pavilion looked different in Martin's memories. Grander, more alive with possibility. July 15th, 1945. The night was thick with summer heat, but nobody seemed to mind. The war in Europe was over, though the Pacific still raged. Young men in uniform filled the dance hall, their medals catching the light from crystal chandeliers, each one grateful for this moment of peace. Martin hadn't planned to come. 23 years old, fresh from the European theatre, he'd seen enough of crowds. But his buddy Jack insisted. "One dance, Marty. You've forgotten what normal feels like." The dance card lay in his pocket now, carefully preserved in tissue paper. He could still make out her neat handwriting. Eleanor Sullivan, written 3, and times in blue ink. She'd been standing by the punch bowl, wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, her dark hair curled just so. Not obviously beautiful, but there was something about her smile that made the chaos of war feel distant. "You're staring, soldier," she'd said, those blue eyes twinkling with mischief. "Just wondering if you'd spare a dance for a man who's forgotten." "Oh," she'd laughed then, a sound like silver bells. "Well, we can't have that. What kind of patriot would I be if I didn't help a hero remember?" They danced every song after that. Eleanor was a teacher at the local high school, she told him, teaching English literature to restless teenagers. She loved Dickens, but secretly. Preferred Austen, collected pressed flowers, and dreamed of seeing Paris someday. "The city's a mess now," Martin had said, thinking of what he'd seen. "But you should see it when it's rebuilt. The gardens at Luxembourg Palace in spring, there's nothing like it. You'll have to show me sometime," she'd replied, and his heart had skipped. Between dances, they'd slipped out onto the terrace. The night air was sweet with jasmine, and somewhere a radio was playing, "I'll Be Seeing You." Eleanor had settled, against the railing, looking up at the stars. "Tell me something true," she'd said suddenly, "something real, not just dancing talk." Martin had considered watching how the moonlight played across her features. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not of dying, I've made peace with that. I'm scared of living, of coming home to a world that feels like a foreign country." She turned to him then, reaching up to straighten his tie. "That's what teachers are for, soldier. We help people find their way home." The memory of her kiss still lingered, soft and sweet and tasting faintly of punch. They'd made plans to meet the next evening, same time, same place. Martin had bought flowers, white roses, because they reminded him of her quiet elegance. But Eleanor never came. He'd waited for hours, watching couples swirl past. Jack found him there at closing time, still holding those wilting roses. "Sometimes that's how it goes, buddy. Some gal's just like a man in uniform for one night." But Martin knew better. He'd seen it in her eyes, felt it in the way she'd held him during that last slow dance. Something real had sparked between them, something true. The letter arrived 3 weeks later, after he'd shipped out to the Pacific. He'd been too raw then to open it, too afraid of what explanation it might hold. By the time he returned to Silver Springs, the trail was cold. The school where she'd taught had no forwarding address. Her family had moved away. It was as if Eleanor Sullivan had vanished into the warm summer air of that July night. Now, 78 years later, Martin carefully unfolded the dance card, its creases worn soft with age. Her handwriting had faded, but remained legible. 3 dances promised, 3 dances shared, 3 chances to fall in love. I looked for you, he whispered to the empty room. Every city I visited, every school I passed, I wondered if you might be there. Did you look for me too, Eleanor Sullivan? The shouting outside grew louder, pulling him back to the present. The young boy was running now, his sneakers pounding against the sidewalk. Martin tucked the dance card away and reached for his cane. Some promises didn't fade with time, like the one he'd made to himself in uniform to protect those who needed protecting. Time to make good on that promise, he murmured, and stepped toward his door. The Silver Springs Chronicle lay spread across Martin's kitchen table, its bold headline impossible to ignore. Gang activity spreads to historic districts. Below it, a grainy photograph showed graffiti on the old Carnegie Library's walls. Martin recognized the tag, the same angular symbols he'd seen appearing around his neighborhood over the past month. Sarah Chen had left the paper during her morning visit, along with a pointed look that seemed to say, "See, I told you so." She wasn't wrong. The neighborhood was changing, and not for the better. Just last week, old Mr. Rodriguez had found his corner store's windows smashed. Yesterday, the Chen family's restaurant had received its first protection money visit. Martin folded the paper carefully, his weathered hands smoothing the creases. Through his kitchen window, he could see children walking home from school, huddled in groups, looking over their shoulders. Not so different from the war, he thought, the way fear could shrink a world, make every corner seem dangerous. A sharp tap at his back door startled him. There stood a boy, maybe 12, with unruly brown hair and a backpack clutched to his chest. Martin recognized him from the neighborhood. He'd seen the child helping Mrs. Rodriguez with her groceries last week. "Can I come in, Mr. Freeman?" The boy's voice quavered. "Please." Martin opened the door without hesitation. The boy slipped inside, his breathing quick and shallow. "Thank you, sir. I'm Tommy. Those guys, they've been following me all week. Catch your breath, son." Martin guided him to a kitchen chair. "Would you like some water?" Tommy nodded, his eyes darting to the window. While Martin filled a glass, he noticed something familiar about the boy's features. Something in the set of his jaw, the curve of his smile, as he thanked Martin for the water. But he couldn't quite place it. "They want my watch," Tommy explained, pulling up his sleeve to reveal an old-fashioned timepiece. "It was my grandfather's. Mum says it's all we have left of him." The watch's face was scratched but well-maintained, its leather band worn smooth with age. Martin could see it was valuable, the kind of thing that would fetch a good price from the right buyer. "You did right, coming here," Martin assured him. "Why don't you tell me about these boys?" As Tommy described the gang members, 3 teenagers who'd been terrorizing the neighborhood's younger kids. Martin's jaw tightened. They were the same ones he'd seen lounging near the corner store, the ones making Sarah Chen's husband consider closing their family restaurant. "My mom says I should just give them the watch," Tommy admitted, his voice small. "She says it's not worth getting hurt over, but—" His fingers traced the watch's edge. "Sometimes I think I can feel my grandfather's heartbeat in it, you know." Martin knew. He thought of Eleanor's dance card, of the letter he'd never opened. Some objects carried more than their weight in metal and leather. They carried pieces of our hearts. "Your mother's right about being careful," Martin said slowly, "but she's wrong about the watch. Some things are worth protecting." Tommy's face lit up. "That's what I think. Mum says I'm too much like her father, always standing up to bullies, even when I shouldn't." He grinned, and again Martin felt that nagging sense of familiarity. "Tell you what," Martin offered, "I'll walk you home today, and tomorrow we'll figure out a better route for you to take." But as they approached the front door, angry voices drifted through the window. The gang members had tracked Tommy to Martin's house. Their shadows fell across the front steps, 3 lanky figures radiating menace. "Old man's got him in there. Knock on the door." "Nah, just kick it in. What's he going to do about it?" Martin felt an old, familiar calm settle over him. The same stillness he'd known in France, in Germany, in all the places where courage had mattered more than fear. He turned to Tommy, whose face had gone pale. "Son, I want you to go into my study and call the police. The number's by the phone. Then stay there until I come get you." "But, Mr. Freeman—" "It's all right." Martin reached for his cane, feeling the solid weight of its oak shaft. "Your grandfather wasn't the only one who knew how to stand up to bullies." The first kick rattled Martin's front door in its frame. The sound echoed through the house like artillery fire, triggering memories he'd spent decades trying to forget. But his hands remained steady as he positioned himself in the entryway. "Last chance, boys," he called out, his voice carrying the weight of 96 years of experience. "Walk away now, and we'll forget this happened." A harsh laugh answered him. "Open up, old man. This ain't your business." "Actually," Martin adjusted his grip on the cane, "you made it my business when you threatened a child on my property." The door burst open with the third kick, hinges screaming in protest. 3 figures pushed their way inside. The leader, tall and lanky, trying to look tough in a leather jacket, despite the warm weather, flanked by 2 shorter boys with matching red bandanas. They hesitated for a moment, thrown by the sight of Martin standing calmly in their path. The leader recovered, first pulling a switchblade from his pocket with practiced flair. "Where's the kid, Gramps?" Martin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied their faces the way he'd once studied maps before missions, looking for weaknesses, for signs of uncertainty. The 2 flanking boys shifted nervously. Only their leader seemed committed to violence. "You're Tommy Martinez's gang," Martin said quietly. "Your father runs the auto shop on Pine Street. Good man, fixed my car last spring." The leader's swagger faltered for just a moment. "You don't know nothing about my family. I know your father worked 16-hour days to keep that shop running. I know he named you after his brother, who died serving in Desert Storm." Martin took a step forward, watching the boy's grip tighten on the knife. "I know he deserves better than seeing his son's name in tomorrow's police report." "Shut up!" The leader lunged forward, blade flashing. Martin moved with the fluid grace of long practice. His cane swept up, catching the boy's wrist with precision. The knife clattered to the floor as Martin stepped inside the leader's reach, using his own momentum to send him stumbling past. The second boy came at him with a wild swing. Martin sidestepped, his cane hooking the boy's ankle. A gentle pull was all it took to disrupt his balance, sending him sprawling into his companion. But the third boy had circled behind during the commotion. Martin felt, rather than saw the attack coming, instincts honed by war responding before. Conscious thought. He turned, raising his cane to block, but at 96, even well-preserved reflexes had their limits. The punch caught him in the ribs, sending a sharp pain through his side. Martin staggered, keeping his feet through sheer determination. The leader had recovered his knife, anger replacing his earlier uncertainty. "Not so tough now, are you, old man?" Time seemed to slow, the way it often did in moments of crisis. Martin saw the leader's weight shift, preparing to charge, saw the second boy scrambling for a heavy brass bookend that had fallen in the scuffle, saw the third boy's eyes dart toward the study door, where Tommy was hopefully already on the phone with police. Martin straightened, ignoring the protest from his ribs. He planted his feet the way his drill sergeant had taught him 78 years ago, cane held at the ready. "You boys want to know something about being tough." His voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded men in battle. "I've seen tough, saw it in 19-year-old kids storming beaches under heavy fire. Saw it in French resistance fighters who had nothing but courage and homemade explosives. Saw it in children in bombed-out cities sharing their last piece of bread." He looked each boy in the eye, one by one. "This? Threatening children, vandalizing stores, terrorizing old folks? This isn't tough. This is just being scared and making everyone else scared with you." The leader's charge faltered. Something in Martin's words, or perhaps his steady gaze, had struck home. But the moment of connection shattered as Tommy's voice rang out from the study doorway. "The police are coming!" The leader's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, knife leading. But this time, Martin was ready. His cane swept up in a perfect arc, catching the boy's hand with precisely calculated force. The knife went flying, embedding itself in the wooden doorframe. In the distance, sirens began to wail. The three boys looked at each other, then at the knife stuck in the doorframe, then at Martin, who stood unflinching despite his age and injury. The decision to flee was made in an instant. They scrambled past him, shoving each other in their haste to escape through the back door. Martin waited until their footsteps faded before allowing himself to lean heavily on his cane. His side ached fiercely, and he could feel a bruise forming where the punch had landed. Tommy emerged from the study, eyes wide. "Mr. Freeman, that was like something from an action movie." Martin managed a smile, though it was tinged with pain. "Not quite, son. In the movies, old men don't crack their ribs playing hero." He sank carefully into his armchair, noting with dismay that the scuffle had knocked Eleanor's photograph askew. As he reached to straighten it, Tommy's watch caught his eye. "May I see that timepiece of yours?" Tommy hesitated only a moment before slipping it off his wrist. Martin held it gently, turning it over in trembling hands. There, engraved on the back in flowing script he'd know anywhere, was a simple message: "To John Sullivan, with love, your sister Eleanor." Martin's heart skipped a beat as he looked up at Tommy's familiar features he should have recognized from the moment the boy first smiled. "Tommy," he whispered, "what's your mother's name?" The cell phone video went viral before the police had even finished taking statements. Someone in the neighborhood, Martin suspected the Rodriguez twins from across the street, had captured the entire confrontation through his front window. By evening, local news vans were parked along his quiet street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the darkening sky like metal flowers. "World War II veteran 96 defends child from gang members," the headlines proclaimed. The video, shaky but clear enough, showed Martin's cane work in all its precise glory. Social media had already dubbed him the Silver Guardian. "You really should go to the hospital," Sarah Chen insisted, pressing an ice pack against his ribs. While reporters knocked persistently at the front door, "At your age, any injury could be serious." "I'm fine," Martin assured her, though each breath brought a sharp reminder of the morning's excitement. He was more interested in Tommy, who sat nearby, clutching a mug of hot chocolate, his grandfather's watch safely back on his wrist. "Mom's on her way," Tommy said, checking his phone. "She's trying to get through the news people outside. She sounds really worried." He paused, fidgeting with the watch strap. "I didn't tell her about you recognizing Aunt Eleanor's engraving." Martin nodded, grateful for the boy's intuition. "How do you tell someone that the elderly man who just fought off gang members might be the lost love of their aunt's life?" The whole thing felt surreal, like one of those melodramatic movies Sarah was always trying to get him to watch. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, Martin could see a woman arguing with reporters, trying to push through their midst. She was perhaps in her 40s, with Tommy's brown hair and determined chin, but it was her eyes that caught. Martin's breath, clear blue, just like Eleanor's. "That's my mom," Tommy confirmed unnecessarily. The doorbell rang, and Sarah went to answer it. Martin heard the exchange of voices, Sarah's protective tone holding the lingering reporters at bay, while Tommy's mother rushed inside. "Tommy!" She swept into the room, gathering her son into a fierce embrace. "Are you all right? When the school called about the video..." "I'm fine, Mom. Mr. Freeman protected me. He was amazing, like a superhero, but with a cane instead of a cape." She turned to Martin then, and the gratitude in her eyes made his ribs hurt a little less. "Mr. Freeman, I don't know how to thank you. I'm Catherine Sullivan Martinez." She extended her hand, then quickly withdrew it when she saw the ice pack he was holding. "Oh, God, you're hurt. We need to get you to a hospital." "Just bruised," Martin assured her, studying her face. The resemblance to Eleanor was striking, though Catherine's features were sharper, more defined. "Your aunt, she taught English, didn't she?" Catherine's eyes widened. "Yes, how did you—" She stopped, really looking at him for the first time. Her gaze drifted to the photograph on the mantel, then back to his face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're him. You're Martin Freeman." Tommy looked between them, confusion clear on his face. "Mom, Aunt Eleanor's soldier," Catherine said softly. "The one she never stopped looking for." She sank into the nearest chair, her professional composure cracking. She had that same photograph. It sat on her desk until the day she died. The word hit Martin like a physical blow. Died. Eleanor was gone. He'd known it was possible, probable even, given their age. But hearing it confirmed made the world tilt sideways for a moment. "When?" he managed to ask. 3 years ago. Catherine replied gently. "She never married, never stopped hoping she'd find you again." She reached into her purse, hands trembling slightly. "She left something for you, actually. We've been trying to locate you for years, but you'd moved, and records from that time are so incomplete." From her purse, she withdrew an envelope, yellowed with age, its corners soft with handling. Martin recognized the handwriting immediately. The same elegant script that had filled his dance card on that summer night so long ago. "She wrote it in 1945, Catherine explained, "the day after the dance." Catherine returned the next morning with a leather-bound journal, its pages swollen with years of entries and pressed flowers. The media circus outside had died down, though Martin's viral fame had only grown. His phone hadn't stopped ringing, with interview requests all politely declined by Sarah Chen, who'd appointed herself his media coordinator. "Mom kept this her whole life," Catherine explained, settling into the armchair across from Martin. His ribs felt better after a night's rest, though Sarah had insisted on taking him to the doctor later that day. "She started it the night she met you." Martin accepted the journal with trembling hands. Eleanor's scent, lavender and vanilla, still clung faintly to its pages. The first entry was dated July 15th, 1945. "Tonight, I danced with a soldier who smells of courage and kindness. His name is Martin Freeman, and he has eyes that have seen too much war, but haven't forgotten how to be gentle. He told me about Paris in springtime, about gardens blooming among the ruins. I think I could fall in love with him. I think I already have." Catherine watched as Martin traced the words with weathered fingers. "Keep reading," she encouraged softly. July 16th, 1945. "The telegram came this morning. Father's had a heart attack. Mother needs me in Boston immediately. I've written Martin. A letter explaining everything, left it with the postmaster to deliver tomorrow. My heart breaks thinking of him waiting at the Golden Pavilion tonight, but Father needs me. I'll be back in a week, 2 at most. Martin will understand. He has to." "She never made it back," Catherine explained, as Martin turned the page. Father's condition was worse than expected. He lingered for months, and by the time he passed, she couldn't find you. The army had moved you to the Pacific Theater." The journal entries continued, spanning decades. 1946. "Searched, another army. Database today. No luck. The records are chaos after the war. So many men moved around. But I won't give up. Somewhere out there, Martin Freeman is living his life, maybe wondering about me too." 1950. "Saw someone who looked like him in downtown Boston today. Same straight shoulders, same careful way of walking. I followed him 3 blocks before realizing it wasn't Martin. I wonder if he still dances." 1960. 15 years since that night at the Golden Pavilion. I've had offers of marriage. Good men, kind men, but none of them tell me about Paris. And gardens or make war stories sound like poetry. None of them are Martin. 1975. John says I'm crazy, still hanging on to a dance from 30 years ago. Maybe I am. But some loves write themselves into your bones. You don't choose them, they choose you. The entries continued year after year. Eleanor had traced Martin's possible movements across continents, following leads that went nowhere. She'd written to veterans associations, scoured phone books in every city she visited, kept that one photograph from the Golden Pavilion on her desk through 40 years of teaching. 1990. My students think it's romantic, their old English teacher, pining for her lost soldier. They help me search the newly computerized records, though most of the Martin Freemans we find are too young or from the wrong state. Today, a girl brought me a pressed flower, said it was for when I finally find him. 2000. The internet makes the world smaller, they say, but I still can't find him. The new millennium dawns and I wonder, does he still have my letter? Did he ever read it? Does he remember the way the music slowed for our last dance? 2020. I'm not well. The doctors use gentle voices when they talk about time left. My only regret is not finding him, not knowing if he had a good life, if he found happiness. Catherine promises she'll keep looking after I'm gone. She's a girl. She believes in love stories. The final entry was dated just weeks before her death. Dearest Martin, wherever you are, I hope you danced. I hope you saw Paris rebuilt. I hope you knew joy. Thank you for teaching me that one perfect night is worth a lifetime of searching. All my love, Eleanor. Martin closed the journal carefully, aware of Catherine's tears and his own. Outside, autumn sunlight painted the world in shades of gold, not unlike that long-ago evening at the Golden Pavilion. She never stopped believing, Catherine said softly. Never stopped hoping she'd find you. When Tommy was born, she used to tell him stories about her brave soldier who was going to show her Paris in springtime. Martin looked at the sealed letter Catherine had brought yesterday, still sitting unopened on his side table. 78. Years of waiting, of wondering. Beside it lay his own unopened letter from 1945. I think, he said quietly, it's time we read them both. The Silver Springs Community Center had transformed itself overnight. White fabric draped the usually stark walls, and track lighting cast warm pools of light on dozens of black and white photographs. Witnesses to victory, our World War II veterans. Read the banner above the entrance, and beneath it, larger than life, hung Martin's photograph from the viral video, cane raised, standing firm against 3 young attackers. You didn't tell me about this part, Martin said to Tommy, who had insisted on accompanying him to the exhibition's opening night. The boy wore a tie for the occasion, though it sat slightly crooked on his collar. Mom said it would be good. For the community, Tommy replied, straightening his tie for the 10th time. To see both sides of the story, you as a young soldier and you now, still protecting people. The gallery was Catherine's idea, Martin knew. After reading Eleanor's letter, a heartbreaking explanation of her father's illness and her desperate hope to return, she'd been determined to honor both her aunt's memory and Martin's service. The viral video had simply provided perfect timing. They moved through the crowd, Martin nodding at familiar faces. His neighbors had contributed their own family photographs, creating a tapestry of memories from that distant war. Mr. Rodriguez's father in his marine dress blues, Sarah Chen's uncle with his bomber crew. Even the father of the gang's leader appeared in one photo, a young Lieutenant Martinez, standing proud in Desert Storm. Mr. Freeman! The call came from a tall teenager wearing a leather jacket that seemed too warm for the weather. Martin recognized him immediately, the gang leader from the confrontation, but something had changed in the boy's bearing. James Martinez, Martin acknowledged, noting the absence of the boy's usual swagger. I'm glad you came. James shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his father who stood supportively nearby. I wanted to apologize for everything. Dad showed me his service photos after what happened, told me about his brother, who I'm named after, about what real courage means. Martin studied the boy's face, seeing past the tough exterior to the uncertainty beneath. Your uncle was a brave man. He'd be proud to see you taking responsibility for your actions. The community service program you suggested, James continued, working with veterans at the VA hospital, it's actually pretty cool. They've got some amazing stories. A small smile crossed Martin's face. Everyone does, son. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. The conversation was interrupted by a ripple of excitement near the entrance. Catherine had arrived, carrying a large, leather-bound album that drew everyone's attention. Martin recognized it from their earlier discussions. Eleanor's personal collection of wartime photographs, including several from the Golden Pavilion. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine addressed the crowd, her voice carrying clearly through the gallery. "Tonight isn't just about honoring our veterans. It's about remembering that love and courage don't fade with time. My aunt, Eleanor Sullivan, spent her life teaching young people about both." She opened the album, revealing the familiar photograph of Eleanor in her blue dress, standing outside the Golden Pavilion. She also spent her life searching for a soldier she met in 1945, a man who showed her that true bravery isn't about fighting, but about protecting others. "Last week, that same man proved her right by protecting my son," the crowd murmured as they made the connection. Catherine continued, her voice thick with emotion. "My aunt didn't live to find her soldier, but tonight we celebrate both their stories and the kind of love that endures across decades." Martin felt Tommy's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. Around them, the photographs seemed to come alive with memory. Young faces full of hope and courage, older faces lined with wisdom and experience, all part of a story bigger than themselves. Near the exit, a new sign caught Martin's attention. "Coming soon, the Golden Pavilion Restoration Project." Below it, an architect's rendering showed the old dance hall returned to its former glory, its crystal chandeliers and polished floors ready to create new memories for a new generation. "Mum says they're going to open it on July 15th, Tommy said softly, "the anniversary of when you met Aunt Eleanor." Martin touched the aged dance card in his pocket, his own contribution to the exhibition, though he wasn't quite ready to share it yet. Some memories needed to be held close a little, longer, like pressed flowers between pages of time. The afternoon sun slanted through Tommy's bedroom window as he carefully spread out the contents of Eleanor's album. His mother had finally allowed him to bring it home from the gallery, with strict instructions about handling the delicate photographs. With cotton gloves, he felt like a detective, piecing together a mystery that had spanned nearly 8 decades. "Mom!" he called out, holding up a particularly interesting photo. "Come look at this one." Catherine appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. She'd been stress baking again, a habit that always intensified when she was processing big emotions. The kitchen downstairs smelled like snickerdoodles, Aunt Eleanor's recipe. "What did you find, honey?" Tommy pointed to a photograph he'd carefully extracted from behind another. It showed a young Martin in his uniform, but he wasn't alone. Next to him stood Eleanor in her teaching clothes, and between them a young boy about Tommy's age. "That's your grandfather," Catherine said softly, sitting beside him on the bed. "John Sullivan, Aunt Eleanor's brother. She was helping him with a school project about the war when she met Martin at the dance." Tommy studied the boy's face intently. "He has the same watch I'm wearing." "The very same." Catherine touched the photograph gently. "Dad said that Grandpa John gave it to him the day he asked permission to marry me. Said it was meant to stay in the family until—" She paused, blinking back tears. "Until what, Mom?" "Until we found Martin. Grandpa John spent years helping Aunt Eleanor search. He felt guilty, you see. His heart attack was why she had to leave so suddenly. She never blamed him, but he blamed himself." Tommy carefully replaced the photograph, then pulled out another. This one showed Eleanor at her desk, much older, surrounded by students. The photograph from the Golden Pavilion was visible on her desk, and she was writing in what he now recognized as her journal. "She never gave up," he said, more statement than question. "Never." Catherine smiled, picking up another photo. "Look at this one. It's from her last class before retirement. The students had all brought her pressed flowers, like the ones she collected the night she met Martin. They'd heard the story so many times, they felt like they knew him too." Tommy sat quietly for a moment, processing. Then he reached for his backpack, pulling out a folder of printouts. "I've been doing research," he explained, "about the Golden Pavilion. Did you know they're recreating everything exactly as it was in 1945? The chandeliers, the curtains, even the punch bowl table where Martin first saw Aunt Eleanor." Catherine picked up one of the printouts, architectural plans for the restoration. "Tommy, what are you planning?" "The opening gala is on July 15th, he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "The exact date they met. I thought maybe Mr. Freeman would want to go, to say goodbye properly." "Oh, honey," Catherine wrapped an arm around her son. "That's a lovely thought, but it might be too painful for him." "No, Mom, you don't understand." Tommy pulled out one final photograph from the album. It showed Eleanor and Martin dancing, their faces young and full of promise. Someone had captured the exact moment they looked at each other, and even in the aged photograph, the connection between them was electric. "Mr. Freeman told me that some promises don't fade with time," Tommy continued. "Aunt Eleanor never stopped believing in their love story. Maybe we can give it the ending she always hoped for." Catherine studied her son's earnest face, so much like her father's in the old photographs. "What exactly did you have in mind?" Tommy grinned, pulling out more printouts. Floor plans, music listings, even a copy of the original dance card. "From that fateful night. First, we need to talk to Sarah Chen. She's kind of Mr. Freeman's protective guard dog, but I think she'll help once she understands. Then we need to contact the restoration committee." As Tommy outlined his plan, Catherine felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the snickerdoodles baking downstairs. Her aunt had always said that love stories didn't end, they just waited for the right moment to begin again. Catherine found the box in Eleanor's attic, tucked away behind decades of careful storage. It was a simple wooden thing, purchased from a craft fair in 1946, but its contents were anything but simple. Inside lay hundreds of letters, each one addressed to Martin Freeman, each one unsent. She brought them to Martin's house on a quiet Sunday morning after the media frenzy had finally died down. Tommy was at a friend's house, giving them the privacy this moment deserved. Martin sat in his familiar armchair, autumn light catching the silver in his hair. "She wrote to you every week for the first year," Catherine explained, setting the box between them. "Then every month, then on special dates, your dance anniversary, holidays, moments when she missed you most." Martin lifted the first letter with trembling hands. The paper was delicate with age, but Eleanor's handwriting remained clear and elegant. "August 1st, 1945. Dearest Martin, Father is doing better, though the doctors insist he needs constant care. I think of you every day, wondering if you received my letter explaining why I couldn't meet you that night. The Golden Pavilion feels empty now. I walked past it yesterday, and the music drifting through its windows only reminded me of our dance. They're still playing our song, 'I'll Be Seeing You.' How strange that a song about separation has become our melody. She tried to find you through the army," Catherine said softly as Martin carefully refolded the letter. "But with your transfer to the Pacific." Martin nodded, selecting another letter, this one from 1950. "Dearest Martin, I saw a young couple dancing today, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. He was in uniform, she wore blue, and they moved together as if the world beyond their arms didn't exist, just like us. The boy couldn't have been more than 20, probably too young to have served in the war, but something in the way he held his partner reminded me of you. Do you still dance, Martin? Do you remember how the chandelier light caught in my hair when you dipped me? John says I'm living in the past, but he's wrong. I'm living in a moment that never got its chance to become the future." The letters continued. Through the decades, capturing moments of Eleanor's life like pressed flowers between pages. 1960, my students asked about the photograph on my desk today. I told them about a soldier who promised to show me Paris in springtime. They're romantic souls, these teenagers, despite their attempts to seem worldly. One girl said it was just like a movie, but movies end after 2 hours, don't they? This feeling has lasted 15 years and shows no sign of fading. 1975. 30 years since our dance, Martin. I visited the Golden Pavilion today. It's becoming run down, but I could still see the ghosts of us there, young and full of possibilities. John's daughter Catherine is the age I was when I met you. She has my eyes, they say, but a fiercer spirit. She believes I'll find you someday, sometimes. Her faith makes me feel young again. 1990, the Berlin Wall has fallen, and I can't help thinking about what you said about gardens growing among ruins. Is that what happened to our love story, Martin? Did it take root in the ruins of our missed chance and grow into something else? This quiet, constant thing that has shaped my whole life. The final letter was dated just weeks before Eleanor passed away. My dearest Martin, the doctors speak in gentle euphemisms, but I know my time is growing short. I've lived a good life, taught thousands of students, loved my family, saw parts of the world, though never Paris. But you remained my greatest adventure, my most beautiful what-if. I'm leaving these letters to Catherine, along with your photograph and the pressed flower from that night. Perhaps someday they'll find their way to you, and you'll know that you were loved, consistently and completely, by a woman who danced with you once in 1945. All my love, eternally. Eleanor Martin sat in silence for a long moment after reading the last letter, his weathered hands resting on the box that contained a lifetime of unspoken words. Outside, a wind stirred the autumn leaves, their whispers like distant dance music. She had a good life, Catherine said gently, but she never stopped wondering about yours. I wish, Martin's voice caught, I wish she knew that I carried her with me too. Through Korea, through every city I visited, through every spring in Paris that I couldn't bring myself to enjoy because she wasn't there. Catherine reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope, the one they'd found in Eleanor's journal. Maybe this is your chance to tell her. The Golden Pavilion Restoration Committee meeting buzzed with unusual energy. Sarah Chen had commandeered the community center's largest conference room and now stood before a detailed timeline pinned to the wall. Tommy sat beside her, self-appointed assistant coordinator, while Catherine reviewed budgets at the far end of the table. Everything has to be perfect, Sarah insisted, tapping her pointer against the July 15th date. Martin Freeman gave this community back its courage. Now it's our turn to give him something back. The committee members, a mix of local business owners, veterans' families, and even James Martinez and his father, nodded in agreement. The viral video had done more than make Martin famous. It had awakened something in Silver Springs, a sense of connection that had been fading. The original chandeliers are being recreated in Prague, Tommy reported, consulting his notebook with serious dedication. They'll be here next week, and Mr. Rodriguez found a vintage punch bowl set from 1945 on an auction site. What about the music? James asked, surprising everyone with his enthusiasm. His community service had evolved into genuine involvement, particularly after discovering his grandfather had also danced at the Golden Pavilion during the war. Catherine smiled, pulling out a yellowed program. Aunt Eleanor kept everything. This is the playlist from that night, including I'll Be Seeing You, the song they danced to. But how do we get him there? Sarah's practical voice cut through the nostalgia. Martin's not one for big events, especially not since the media circus. Tommy straightened in his chair. Leave that to me. I've been visiting him every day and telling him about the restoration. He pretends he's not interested, but he always asks questions. The meeting continued, details falling into place like steps in an intricate dance. The Martinez family's auto shop would provide vintage cars for atmosphere. Sarah's husband, a master carpenter, was recreating the exact wooden dance floor. The Rodriguez twins had convinced their grandmother to make her famous punch recipe. But it was Tommy who presented the most ambitious part of the plan. I found these, he said, carefully laying out black and white photographs. They're from the original opening night in 1943. Look at the decorations, the flowers, even the way they arranged the tables. We can recreate everything exactly as it was. The committee leaned in, studying the images. The Golden Pavilion's original glory shone through despite the aged photographs. Crystal lights casting star-like reflections, tables draped in white linens, fresh flowers everywhere. There's more, Tommy continued, pulling out Eleanor's dance. A card. Mom found this in Aunt Eleanor's things. It has the exact time they first danced, 8:45 p.m. We can time everything to match. Sarah nodded approvingly. Martin always says the best plans are built on precise timing. But what about his ribs? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. They're still healing. The doctor says he'll be fully recovered by then, Catherine assured them. And she hesitated, then smiled. I haven't told anyone this yet, but I found something in Aunt Eleanor's attic yesterday. A blue dress from that night, preserved all these years. I'm having it reproduced. I thought maybe I could wear it. A hushed silence fell over the room as the significance settled in. It wasn't just about recreating a place or a moment. They were weaving together threads of memory, love, and time. There's one more thing, Tommy said quietly. He pulled out the final item from his folder, a slightly crumpled piece of paper with his careful handwriting. I wrote this for Mr. Freeman. I think maybe he needs to know what Aunt Eleanor taught me about love, even though I never met her. James, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. My grandfather used to say that sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting, it's believing in something good, even when it seems impossible. Sarah looked around the room at the unlikely group. Former adversaries, different generations, various backgrounds, all united in their determination to give one old soldier a moment of magic. All right then, she said, turning back to her timeline. Let's make this impossible thing happen. Tommy, you're in charge of keeping Martin occupied until the big night. Catherine, we'll need those dress measurements by Thursday. James, can your brother's shop handle the vintage car restorations? As the meeting continued, Tommy slipped his hand into his pocket, touching his grandfather's watch. Its steady ticking seemed to whisper that some moments were worth waiting for, no matter how long it took. The community center auditorium had never been so full. Every seat was taken with people standing along the walls, all dressed in their Sunday best. Martin sat in the front row, uncomfortable in his newly pressed suit, with Tommy proudly beside him. The boy hadn't left his side since arriving to escort him to what he'd called a small community appreciation gathering. Small gathering indeed, Martin muttered, eyeing the crowd. His ribs had healed well enough, but he still carried his cane, more for comfort now than necessity. The viral video played on a loop on the screen behind the stage, muted, but impossible to ignore. Mayor Chen, Sarah's cousin as it turned out, stood at the podium, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room. Today we honor not just an act of courage, but a lifetime of service. Martin Freeman's recent actions reminded us all that heroism knows no age, and that one person standing up for what's right can change an entire community. Martin shifted in his seat, never comfortable with praise, but Tommy's hand slipped into his, anchoring him to the moment. Since that day, the mayor continued, our community has seen remarkable changes. The Martinez Auto Shop has started a youth mentorship program led by James Martinez himself. He gestured to where James stood with his father, both in clean, pressed shirts, looking proud. The Rodriguez family has reopened their corner store with security systems donated by local businesses. The Chen restaurant has seen record crowds as people from all over the city come to dine where, as social media puts it, the Silver Guardian takes his morning coffee. A ripple of warm laughter moved through the crowd. Martin noticed Sarah Chen dabbing at her eyes in the second row, but perhaps most significantly, Mayor Chen's voice softened. This incident has reminded us of our connection to history, to the values that built this community, values that Mr. Freeman learned as a young soldier and never forgot. The screen behind him changed, showing the photograph from the Golden Pavilion. Martin's heart caught at the sight of Eleanor's smile, preserved in black and white. Many of you have heard the story by now, the mayor continued, of a young soldier and a teacher who shared one perfect night of dancing in 1945, of circumstances that tore them apart, and of a love that endured through decades of separation. Today, we're not just honoring Martin Freeman, the veteran, or Martin Freeman, the viral hero. We're honoring Martin Freeman, the man who showed us that courage and love are ageless. Catherine stood then, carrying something covered in blue velvet. "Mr. Freeman," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "My Aunt Eleanor kept every article about your service, both during the war and after. She believed that true heroes aren't those who seek glory, but those who help others. Simply because it's right, she unveiled a shadow box containing a new medal, golden, hanging from a blue and white ribbon. The City Council has created the Sullivan-Freeman Award for civilian courage, to be given annually to those who demonstrate exceptional bravery in service to their community. We'd like you to be its first recipient." Martin stood slowly, leaning on his cane. As Catherine pinned the medal to his lapel, she whispered, "She would have been so proud to see this." But it was Tommy who brought the surprise that broke through Martin's careful composure. The boy stepped up to the podium, unfolding a piece of paper with trembling hands. "Mr. Freeman," he began, his young voice clear and strong, "I never met my great-aunt Eleanor, but I grew up with her story. Mum says she taught thousands of students over her career, but her greatest lesson was about love. About how real love doesn't need happy endings to be true. About how sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting, but keeping your heart open despite loss." Tommy looked up from his paper, directly at Martin. "When you saved me from those guys, you weren't trying to be a hero. You were just being who you are. Someone who protects others, who stands up for what's right. Aunt Eleanor saw that in you in 1945, and it's still true today." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar object, his grandfather's watch. "This watch has been in our family for generations. Aunt Eleanor's brother wore it the night you met her. Mom says it was supposed to stay in the family until we found you." He held it out. "I think maybe it's done its job." Martin accepted the shoe, watch with unsteady hands, its weight familiar and strange at once. The inscription caught the light. "To John Sullivan with love, your sister, Eleanor." "There's one more thing," Tommy said, and something in his voice made Martin look up sharply. "The Golden Pavilion restoration project is almost complete. They're having a grand opening celebration on July 15th, exactly 78 years after you and Aunt Eleanor danced there." The boy's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Mom found the original music playlist and her blue dress, and—" He glanced at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "We were hoping you might want to go, to say goodbye properly, or maybe to keep a promise about a dance that was interrupted too soon." Martin looked down at the watch, ticking steadily, in his palm, then back at Tommy's hopeful face. In the crowd, he saw Sarah Chen wiping away tears, James Martinez standing tall and proud, the Rodriguez twins clutching hands in anticipation. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, I think it's time." The restored Golden Pavilion glowed in the summer twilight, exactly as Martin remembered it. Every detail had been meticulously recreated, from the crystal chandeliers to the polished wooden dance floor, right down to the punch bowl table, where he'd first seen Eleanor. The only difference was the crowd. Not young soldiers and their dates, but 3 generations of Silver Springs residents, all dressed in 1940s fashion. Martin stood in the entrance, steady on his cane, wearing his carefully preserved dress uniform. It had needed letting out, apparently 96 years added inches that 23 hadn't known. But the medals still gleamed. The creases still held sharp. "Ready?" Tommy appeared at his elbow, dapper in a vintage-style suit. The boy had appointed himself Martin's personal escort for the evening, though Martin suspected it was as much to calm his own nerves as to help. Inside, the band was playing period music, the sound so authentic it made Martin's heart ache. Couples moved across the floor in practiced steps. Apparently, Sarah Chen had organized dance lessons for the whole town over the past month. "Everything's just as it was," Martin murmured, taking in the details. The fresh flowers, the hanging bunting, even the way the light caught the crystal and scattered stars across the walls. "Almost everything," came Catherine's voice from behind them. Martin turned, and for a moment his heart stopped. She wore Eleanor's blue dress, or rather, its perfect reproduction. Her hair was styled in 1940s waves, and she wore her aunt's pearl necklace. The resemblance was stunning, but it was her smile, so like Eleanor's, that brought tears to Martin's eyes. "Oh, my dear," he said softly, taking her hand. "You look just like her." "She'd want you to have this dance," Catherine said, pressing something into his palm. It was Eleanor's dance card from that night, preserved for 78 years. It's the right time, the right song, everything she hoped for. The band struck up, "I'll Be Seeing You," its familiar melody wrapping around Martin like an old friend. Catherine led him to the dance floor, past smiling faces and misty eyes. He saw Sarah Chen clutching her husband's hand, the Rodriguez twins recording everything on their phones, James Martinez standing tall and proud with his father. "May I?" Martin asked formally, offering his hand as he had so many years ago. They moved together in the old steps, muscle memory transcending time. Catherine was a good dancer. Eleanor had taught her well, but Martin closed his eyes and let himself remember. The scent of jasmine drifting through open windows, the rustle of a blue dress, a young woman's laugh like silver bells. "She wrote about this moment," Catherine said softly as they turned. "In her journal, she said she knew from that first dance that some loves write themselves into your bones." "She was right," Martin replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I looked for her too, you know. Every city, every school. I thought I saw her 100 times, but it was never her." The music swelled and Catherine squeezed his hand. "Look," she whispered. The dancers had parted, creating a path to the terrace doors. There, bathed in moonlight, stood a table he hadn't noticed before. On it sat Eleanor's photograph from that night, surrounded by pressed flowers, hundreds of them, contributions from everyone in town. Beside it lay her journal, her letters, and a small blue envelope Martin recognized as the one he'd carried through war and peace, never opening. "It's time," Tommy said, appearing beside them. He held out the watch, John Sullivan's watch. "Now Martin's. Time to read it." Martin's hands trembled as he lifted the envelope. 78 years of wondering, of what-ifs, had led to this moment. The paper was fragile with age, but Eleanor's handwriting remained clear. "My dearest Martin, by the time you read this, I'll be on a train to Boston. Father has had a heart attack. I don't want to leave. God knows I don't want to leave. But he's asking for me. I promise I'll be back in a week, 2 at most. Wait for me. I've never believed in love at first sight, but perhaps love at first dance is different. You make me believe in impossible things, my brave soldier, like Paris. Gardens blooming in spring and happy endings after war. All my love, Eleanor." The music faded, but Martin barely noticed. He was aware of Catherine's gentle grip on his arm, of Tommy's presence beside him, of an entire community holding its breath. "She came back," he said finally, looking at Catherine. "She came back, and I was gone. But she never stopped loving you," Catherine replied. "And now you know you were loved, Martin Freeman, completely and consistently for 78 years. Martin touched the photograph gently, tracing Eleanor's smile. "I know something else too," he said. "She was right about love at first dance. Some loves do write themselves into your bones, and some promises are worth keeping, no matter how long it takes." Around them, the golden pavilion glowed with renewed life, as if all the love stories it had witnessed over the years had seeped into its walls, waiting for this moment of completion. The morning after the Golden Pavilion celebration, Martin sat in his familiar armchair, surrounded by Eleanor's letters. The telegram that had pulled him away to the Pacific Theatre lay open on his lap, his own undelivered explanation mirror to hers. Outside, summer light painted Silver Springs in shades of gold, much like that long-ago morning when everything changed. "More tea?" Sarah Chen stood in his doorway, holding a fresh pot. She'd appointed herself guardian of his peace today, turning away well-meaning visitors and media requests. "Thank you, Sarah." He smiled as she poured. "I suspect you had more to do with last night than you're letting on." She settled into the chair opposite his, her usual efficiency softened by contentment. "Tommy did most of the planning. That boy has his great-aunt's spirit, and her gift for bringing people together." Martin picked up one of Eleanor's later letters, dated 1990. She would have loved him. "Listen to this. Sometimes I think love doesn't disappear when we lose it. It just transforms, waiting to be found in new ways, new faces." A knock at the door interrupted them. Catherine entered, carrying a large leather album he hadn't seen before. "I found this in Mom's attic," she explained, sitting beside Martin. "It's Eleanor's travel diary. She did make it to Paris eventually, in 1965. Martin's hands trembled slightly as he opened the album. There was Eleanor, 20 years older than his memories, but still beautiful, standing in front of the Luxembourg Gardens. The flowers were in full bloom behind her. She wrote, "About you there," Catherine said softly, turning to a dog-eared page. "She said the gardens were exactly as you described them, and she could almost see you there, young and brave, promising her springtime in Paris." Sarah quietly excused herself, leaving them alone with the memories. Martin traced Eleanor's handwriting with gentle fingers. "Paris, April 1965. The gardens are blooming just as Martin said they would. I can feel him here among the flowers, in the way the light catches the fountains, in the laughter of young lovers on ancient benches. Perhaps that's what true love is, not just the presence of someone, but the way they change how you see the world forever." "She never married," Catherine said, watching Martin's face. "But she wasn't unhappy. She had her students, her family, her travels. She used to tell me that some loves are meant to be lived and others are meant to be carried." Martin nodded, understanding. "I felt the same. I dated a few times over the years, but no one ever measured up to one perfect night of dancing." Catherine pulled something else from her bag, a pressed flower, blue and delicate with age. "She saved this from that night. Said it was from your boutonniere. I found it pressed between the pages of her favorite book." "Pride and Prejudice?" Martin guessed, remembering Eleanor's confession about secretly preferring Austen to Dickens. Catherine's eyes widened. "Yes. How did you—" "She told me that night. Said she loved how Austen understood that sometimes love needs time and distance to grow stronger." He carefully accepted the pressed flower. "I never read it before I met her. Well, I read it every year, thinking of her." They sat in comfortable silence, turning pages in the album. Eleanor at the Eiffel Tower in the Louvre, walking along the Seine. In each photo, she smiled directly at the camera, as if she knew someday Martin would see these images. "I have a confession," Catherine said finally. "When we were planning the Golden Pavilion celebration, I was worried it might be too painful for you, but Tommy insisted. He said Aunt Eleanor's story taught him that love doesn't need a happy ending to be worthwhile." Martin closed the album gently. "He's right. And last night wasn't an ending, it was a completion. Everything Eleanor and I felt that night, everything we carried all these years, it's been passed on. I see it in Tommy's determination, in the way this community came together, in the love that brought the Golden Pavilion back to life." He reached for John Sullivan's watch, now his most treasured possession. "Time doesn't heal all wounds," he said, touching its familiar face. "But sometimes it gives us something better, the understanding that our deepest hurts can become our greatest gifts." The Golden Pavilion found new life after its grand reopening. Every Friday night, the restored dance hall filled with music and laughter as Sarah Chen's community dance classes graduated from practice sessions to regular social events. Martin often sat on the terrace, in the exact spot where he and Eleanor had shared their first kiss, watching new love stories unfold on the dance floor. "Hot chocolate?" Tommy appeared at his side, carefully carrying 2 steaming mugs. The boy had taken to spending his Friday evenings keeping Martin company, claiming the best stories were told from the terrace vantage point. "Thank you." Martin accepted the drink, noticing how Tommy automatically sat in the chair Eleanor had occupied 78 years ago. "Your mother called earlier. She's bringing more of Eleanor's books tomorrow." "The ones from her classroom?" Tommy's eyes lit up. He'd been fascinated by the notes his great-aunt had written in the margins of her favorite novels, little observations about life and love that spanned decades of teaching. "And some photo albums we haven't seen yet." Martin smiled at the boys. Enthusiasm. "She thinks there might be more pictures from Paris." Inside, the band started playing "I'll Be Seeing You." They always included it in their set list now, a tradition born from Eleanor's story. Martin watched as James Martinez led his dance partner, one of the Rodriguez twins, in a careful waltz. The boy had turned out to be a natural dancer. Once he traded his tough guy facade for honest emotion. "Mr. Freeman," Tommy's voice was thoughtful, "do you think Aunt Eleanor would be happy about how everything turned out?" Martin considered the question, watching couples twirl beneath the crystal chandeliers. The renovated space hosted more than just dances now. There were community meetings, art classes, and a weekly veterans gathering where old soldiers shared stories with young people eager to learn from history. "I think she'd love it," he said finally. She always believed that teaching wasn't just about books. It was about showing people how to find beauty in unexpected places. Tommy nodded, pulling out his grandfather's watch, now Martin's, and checking the time. "The garden committee meeting starts in 10 minutes. Want me to take notes for you?" Martin chuckled. The boy had inherited his great-aunt's organizing spirit, keeping track of all the community projects that had sprung up in the wake of their viral fame. The latest was a memorial garden being planted outside the Golden Pavilion, featuring the same flowers Eleanor had pressed between her books. "Go ahead," Martin encouraged. "Just remember what we discussed about the roses. White ones, like the bouquet you brought that second night." Tommy grinned, already heading inside. "Don't worry, I won't let them change it." Alone on the terrace, Martin closed his eyes and let the music wash over him. The steps he and Eleanor had danced still echoed here, but they were joined now by new rhythms, new stories. Sarah Chen's youngest daughter was taking violin lessons in the upstairs room. The Martinez Auto Shop had sponsored a scholarship for aspiring mechanics. The Rodriguez twins were organizing a local history project, interviewing elderly residents about their love stories. "You were right, Eleanor," he murmured to the evening air. "Love doesn't disappear, it transforms." He could almost hear her laugh, see her eyes twinkling with mischief as she straightened his tie. The pain of their separation had mellowed into something else, a grateful appreciation for the way their brief encounter had rippled outward through time, touching lives they could never have imagined. The watch in his pocket ticked steadily, marking seconds that no longer felt like a countdown to regret, but rather a rhythm of possibility. Tomorrow, Catherine would bring more pieces of Eleanor's life for him to discover. Next week, the garden would begin blooming, and every Friday night, couples would dance beneath crystal stars, adding their own steps to the pavilion's living history. Martin stood carefully, his cane catching the last rays of sunset. Inside, Tommy was organizing the garden committee with Eleanor's precise attention to detail. New stories were beginning, even as the old ones found their proper place. In memory, it was time to join them. The idea came to Martin on a Tuesday morning, as Catherine helped him organize Eleanor's books in his study. They had created a small library of her collection, each volume carefully arranged according to her own system, discovered in a notebook from her teaching days. "She always kept Jane Austen next to the window," Catherine explained, placing Pride and Prejudice on the sunny shelf. "Said love stories needed natural light to truly shine." Martin watched her moving around the room, so like her aunt in her precise movements and gentle touch with the books. His house had gradually filled with Eleanor's presence, her photographs on the walls, her letters in his desk drawer, her pressed flowers framed and hanging where morning light could catch. "Them. Catherine," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about the house." She paused, holding a collection of poetry. "What about it? It's too big for just me. All these rooms, all these memories." He gestured to the spaces that had slowly transformed. "Over the past months, they should be filled with family." Catherine set the book down carefully. "Martin, what are you suggesting? Your lease is up next month. You and Tommy, you've been here almost every day anyway. The commute to his school is shorter from here, and there's that garden you've been wanting to plant." He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Are you asking us to move in with you?" "Only if you want to. The house needs a family again. And He touched Eleanor's favorite book, its spine worn smooth with years of reading. "I need one too." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but before she could respond, they heard the front door open, and Tommy's voice called out, "Mom! Mr. Freeman! You've got to see this!" The boy burst into the study, brandishing a newspaper. James Martinez was with him, both of them grinning with barely contained excitement. "The Golden Pavilion story won an award." Tommy thrust the paper at them. "The journalist who covered our restoration project, she won a national prize for community reporting." James nodded eagerly. "It's bringing more attention to Silver Springs. Dad says business at the shop has doubled since the article came out. People want to see where it all happened." Martin accepted the newspaper, reading the headline, "Love's Long Dance, How One Veteran's Story Revitalized a Community." Below, it was a photograph of the Golden Pavilion at night, its windows glowing with warmth, couples dancing beneath the crystal chandeliers. "That's not all," Tommy continued, practically bouncing. "Remember how the garden committee was worried? About funding. The city council just approved a grant. They're calling it the Eleanor Sullivan Memorial Garden, and they want to extend it all the way around the pavilion." Catherine touched Martin's arm gently. "It seems your house isn't the only thing finding new life." Martin looked around the study, at Eleanor's books bathed in morning light, at Tommy's homework spread across the desk, at the family photographs now mingled with his own. The change had been so gradual, he hadn't noticed how natural it felt. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "Eleanor wrote something in one of her Paris letters. She said home isn't just a place. It's the feeling that love has somewhere to grow." Tommy's eyes lit up with understanding. "Are you asking us to—" "Only if you want to," Martin repeated. But the boy was already hugging him. "We can plant Mom's herbs in the kitchen garden, and maybe get a dog, and I can help organize the rest of Aunt Eleanor's books and—" "Slow down," Catherine laughed, but her eyes were shining. "We should discuss this properly." "What's to discuss?" Tommy demanded. "It's perfect. Mr. Freeman needs family. We need a real house instead of that cramped apartment, and this way we can all take care of each other." James, who had been quietly watching, spoke up. "My grandfather says sometimes the best families are the ones we choose." He smiled shyly. "That's what he told me when Dad and I started volunteering at the Veterans Center together." Martin felt something settle in his heart. A piece of happiness he hadn't known was missing. "Eleanor chose all of us," he said softly. "She kept loving until her love created something new, something that's still growing." Catherine wiped her eyes and picked up Pride and Prejudice again, returning it to its sunny spot by the window. "Then I guess we better start planning where everything goes. Tommy, why don't you show James the backyard? We might need his father's landscaping advice for that garden you're already designing in your head." As the boys rushed out, their excited voices trailing behind them, Catherine turned to Martin. "Are you sure about this?" He touched the watch in his pocket, its steady ticking a reminder that time could bring gifts as well as take them away. "Eleanor always said some loves write themselves into your bones. I think some families do too." The Eleanor Sullivan Memorial Garden bloomed in full glory for Sarah Chen's daughter's wedding. White roses climbed the Golden Pavilion's restored walls, their fragrance mingling with jasmine in the summer evening air. Martin sat in his place of honor near the terrace doors, Tommy beside him in a junior usher's suit that matched the roses in his boutonniere. "Everything's ready," Tommy reported, consulting his grandfather's watch, the same one that had once helped bring their family together. "James and his dad finished setting up the last arch 10 minutes ago." Martin nodded approvingly. The Martinez family had outdone themselves, creating elegant floral arches that led from the garden into the pavilion. Each arch held photographs of love stories, couples who had danced here over the decades, including a certain soldier and teacher from 1945. The ceremony space itself was Eleanor's greatest gift to the community. Her pressed flower collection, carefully preserved over decades, had provided the template for the garden's design. Now, those same flowers bloomed in living color around the gathered guests. "Look," Tommy whispered as the music began. "Mum's wearing Aunt Eleanor's pearls." Catherine walked down the aisle first, as matron of honor, the pearls gleaming against her blue dress, the same shade Eleanor had worn that fateful night. Behind her came Sarah's daughter, Lucy Chen, radiant in vintage lace. Her grandmother's wedding dress had been carefully altered by Mrs. Rodriguez, who had added subtle touches of blue ribbon as a nod to the garden's inspiration. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. The young couple had requested that Martin share Eleanor's words about love from her Paris diary. "True love is like a garden. It requires patience, nurturing, and faith that something beautiful will bloom from tiny seeds of hope." As the newlyweds shared their first dance beneath the crystal chandeliers, Martin felt a familiar presence beside him. Sarah Chen settled into Eleanor's chair, smoothing her mother-of-the-bride dress. "Hard to believe it's been a year," she said softly, watching her daughter twirl in her husband's arms. "Since that day you saved Tommy, since all of this began." Martin touched the watch in his pocket. Eleanor would have loved this, seeing her garden become a place for new beginnings. "She's here," Sarah said with certainty, "in every flower, every photograph, every couple dancing beneath these lights." She paused, then added with a smile, "and in every student who reads her books in the library we named for her." The Eleanor Sullivan Memorial Library had opened last month in the Golden Pavilion's East Wing, housing her entire book collection, along with comfortable reading nooks and a special corner for pressing flowers. Local schools brought classes there, regularly, continuing her legacy of teaching through literature and love. Tommy appeared with punch for them both, served in vintage cups that matched the original ones from 1945. "James says the next wedding here might be one of the Rodriguez. Twins," he reported with the solemnity of a junior matchmaker. "He's been dancing with Rosa all evening." Martin chuckled. Young James had indeed grown into a fine young man, trading his gang colors for a community leader's quiet confidence. His father's auto shop now ran a successful apprenticeship program, teaching troubled youth the value of honest work and second chances. As if summoned by their conversation, James approached with Rosa Rodriguez on his arm. "Mr. Freeman," he said formally, "would you share your wisdom about marriage with Lucy and David? They're collecting advice from everyone who's known true love." Martin's heart caught at the simple sincerity in James's voice. These young people saw him not as the viral video's silver guardian, but as someone who understood love's deepest truths. "Tell them," he said after a moment, "that love isn't just about the big moments, the first dances, the grand gestures. It's about choosing each other every day, even when you're apart, even when decades pass, even when all you have is memories and hope." Rosa wiped away a tear. "Like you and Miss Eleanor." "Like Eleanor and me," Martin agreed, "but also like this community choosing to believe in second chances. Like Tommy and Catherine choosing to make a new family. Like your grandmother, Mrs. Rodriguez, choosing to teach young ladies to dance so they'd be ready for their own Golden Pavilion moments." The music changed to "I'll Be Seeing You," now a tradition at every pavilion event. Couples, young and old, filled the dance floor, their movements reflecting countless hours of practice at Sarah's dance classes. Martin closed his eyes briefly, remembering Eleanor's smile, the way she'd felt in his arms that first night. When he opened them, he saw that love reflected everywhere, in the garden she'd inspired, in the families she'd helped bring together, in the stories that would continue long after this night. Some loves, he thought, watching the dancers, never really end. They just keep blooming in new hearts, season after season. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the study windows, catching dust motes that danced like memories in the air. Martin sat in his familiar chair, now accompanied by the soft sounds of family life. Catherine preparing breakfast. In the kitchen, Tommy's footsteps racing down the stairs, and the new puppy's eager bark at the morning paper delivery. On his desk lay Eleanor's last diary, open to an entry he'd read countless times. Some love stories don't need endings, because they become beginnings for others. Beside it sat a fresh-pressed flower, courtesy of Tommy's latest contribution to the family tradition. "Grandpa Martin!" Tommy burst into the study, already dressed for school. The name had come naturally over the past year, as natural as the way their lives had woven together. "Did you see? The Golden Pavilion made the National Register of Historic Places." Martin accepted the newspaper Tommy thrust into his hands. There it was, their pavilion, their garden, their story. But it wasn't just their story anymore. The photograph showed dozens of pressed flowers decorating the library walls, each accompanied by a note sharing someone's love story. The tradition had started when Tommy displayed Eleanor's collection, and now visitors added their own memories, creating a living tapestry of love through the generations. "Your aunt would have loved this," Martin said, touching the photograph. Gently. "She does love it," Tommy corrected with the certainty of youth. "Mum says she's in every flower that blooms in the garden, every couple that dances on Friday nights, every story that finds its way home." Catherine appeared in the doorway, wearing Eleanor's pearls, a daily habit now rather than a special occasion choice. "Ready for breakfast? Sarah's coming over to help plan the pavilion's second anniversary celebration." The puppy, named Austin naturally, bounded in behind her, heading straight for Martin's lap. They'd found her at the shelter, the last of her litter, waiting for someone to choose her. Just as Eleanor had always said, love finds its own time. "Did you tell him about the letter?" Tommy asked his mother excitedly. Catherine smiled. "I was getting to that." She handed Martin an envelope bearing an official Paris postmark. The Luxembourg Gardens curator wrote back. They'd love to host a sister garden exhibition featuring Eleanor's pressed flower collection and the stories behind them. Martin felt his heart lift. Eleanor's garden would bloom in Paris after all, sharing its message of enduring love with a new audience. The curator had even suggested a permanent exchange program between the two gardens, ensuring that flowers from Paris would always bloom at the Golden Pavilion, and Silver Springs flowers would grace the Luxembourg Gardens. "Time to go," Catherine reminded them gently. "Tommy has school, and you have your veteran storytelling session at the library." Martin nodded, carefully placing Eleanor's diary back on its shelf by the window. The study had become a perfect blend of past and present, his military medals beside Eleanor's teaching awards, Tommy's school pictures next to age photographs from the Golden Pavilion, fresh flowers in Eleanor's favorite vase. As they headed out, Martin paused to straighten the new family portrait hanging in the hallway. There they all were, himself in his favorite chair, Catherine and Tommy beside him, Austin sprawled across their feet, and behind them, restored to pride of place, the photograph of a young couple dancing at the Golden Pavilion in 1945. Tommy reached for his grandfather's watch, still keeping perfect time after all these years. "We don't want to be late. James is bringing his auto shop students to hear your stories today." Martin smiled, thinking of how many new chapters had grown from that one perfect night of dancing. Eleanor had been right, as she so often was. Love didn't need endings when it could offer endless beginnings instead. Together, they stepped out into the morning light, where the garden Eleanor had dreamed of bloomed in full glory, promising another day of stories waiting to be told.